Good morning and welcome, ladies, gentlemen, colleagues. My name is Nada Bouari, and I'll be your MC and moderator for today's workshop. I'm joining you from Amman, Jordan, where I'm based with UNDP's Arab States Regional Hub, working on external relations and partnerships. My colleagues on the organizing committee and I are very pleased to welcome you to this morning's development dialogue session on placing local systems at the center. The EU and UNDP have partnered in recent years on initiatives for strengthening local systems and communities to promote resilience, stability, and recovery. This workshop is our opportunity to exchange on common approaches and lessons learned through the lens of our collaboration in Lebanon, Libya, Yemen, and Iraq, and to further exchange on ideas on local development programs that can be applied in similar contexts. We will begin with opening remarks today from the leadership of the EU and UNDP, who will much more thoroughly set the stage for today's workshop, and whom I will present shortly. The opening will be followed by two exchange sessions in which UNDP and EU colleagues will present local development approaches and lessons from Lebanon, Libya, Yemen, and Iraq, and the audience will have the opportunity to exchange in an interactive discussion with the speakers and with one another during both exchanges. There will be a 15-minute pause between the two exchange sessions. A panel discussion on how the EU and UNDP might join forces to work locally in the future will follow the two exchange sessions. And we will conclude the day with the launch of the EU-UNDP joint program on strengthening institutional and economic resilience in Yemen. Today's workshop is being run by the team at Learnant, who are taking care of all technical aspects of our event in the background. And also please note that the workshop is being recorded. Without further delay, allow me to introduce the leadership of the EU and UNDP, who have kindly recorded their introductory remarks. Our speakers in order of their appearance are, from the EU, Mr. Jean-Louis Ville, Acting Director for the Middle East, Asia and Pacific, DG INSTPA. From UNDP, Dr. Khalid Abouzar, Assistant Administrator and Director of the Regional Bureau for Arab States. From the EU, Ms. Henrika Trautmann, Acting Director for the Neighborhood South, DG NEAR. And from UNDP, Asako Okai, Assistant Administrator and Director of the Crisis Bureau.
Dear colleagues, partners and friends, let me first warmly welcome you all to this workshop organized by the UNDP. Today's event will dive into how protracted crisis and fragility are addressed at local level, and this in several countries. Two of these are under the remits of DG INPA, Yemen and Iraq. The topic is extremely relevant today as a growing numbers of countries with formal borders and governments lack the capacity to implement even the most essential functions of governance. In turn, this means local level institutions and actors are stepping in to fill the void and provide basic services to the populations. Yemen and Iraq represent two examples of such fragile states where central authority has faced serious challenges in fulfilling its functions vis-à-vis the citizens. The fragile situation in the two countries is quite different. Yemen is in the midst of its period of catastrophic fragmentation that has fully undermined state authority. In Iraq, the post-crisis period is marked by cycles of violence, contest of state legitimacy, weak institutions, and unstable governance. What these two examples have in common is the general disruption of services delivery and the erosions of opportunities and jobs for large, predominantly young populations. In such operating environments, we believe that to truly make a difference, we need to intervene at the level that is closest to the people, that will deliver the assistance, the vital assistance, where it is needed the most. In both countries, we have a long-standing partnership with UNDP for support to local communities and local authorities. This is a partnership which has always strived to strengthen resilience of local actors and communities and to promote stability and recovery. As you might know, the EU is now in the middle of the programming exercise for the next 7 years period. Although it is yet too early to announce concrete funding figures, it is already clear that we are stepping up our engagement with the Middle East region as a whole. In the case of Iraq, this means that earlier short-term intervention through special measures are replaced with a long-term multi-annual indicative program which will have an increased focus on sustainable economic development and where Iraq's potential as upper middle income country is particularly considered. As for Yemen, a medium-term strategy with a vision towards Yemen's after the crisis is being developed. Although perspectives are not bright, we want to be ready when things start turning. The key word here is commitment, and we look forward to continue working with you within these frameworks. Today's workshop will therefore be a timely and interesting opportunity to share lessons learned, to be able to learn from our experiences in order to improve our delivery in the future. I wish you a very fruitful discussion.
Allow me to start by thanking the European Union for our long-standing partnership, delivering important development impact and lifting lives across the Arab State region. I'm also sending here my own word of welcome and greetings to all participants in today's event. This workshop highlights the importance of local approaches to resilience, stability and recovery. This area has become a growing priority within our partnership between the EU and UNDP in the region. It is an important opportunity to exchange perspectives and learn together to improve our joint work, which is of particular relevance in fragile and conflict settings. Local approaches and decentralization are important aspects of the overall push to development in any country. This is especially the case in situations of crisis, where local institutions and the local economy can be a very important part of what holds societies together, especially when governance systems come under pressure and social cohesion and trust in institutions are thin. And it is therefore appropriate that together the EU and UNDP have prioritized initiatives in crisis setting which strengthen the resilience of local actors and local economies. This work is also important because it preserves livelihood and safeguards social contracts. It is also important because it mitigates risk of escalation, of instability and violence, and it secures a pathway to inclusive and sustainable recovery and development. Let me illustrate with a few concrete examples. In Lebanon, we are bridging community recovery efforts with longer-term stability and service delivery needs by introducing sustainable solutions such as solar energy and energy efficiency. The initiatives boast significant results, such as preventing around 3,000 tons of CO2 emission per year. In Libya, UNDP's joint effort with the EU focus on host communities and municipalities strained by hosting refugees and IDPs. Benefiting roughly 5 million people to date, our support to the delivery of basic services has enabled 65 municipalities to adopt more inclusive means for local decision-making and methods to preserve the social cohesion. Similarly, in Yemen, we have helped establish local capacities, 223 village cooperative councils and district management teams, which have then developed their own resilience plan and reconstruction projects. Looking ahead, our long-standing partnership in Yemen will go beyond the basics of service delivery, targeting around 45 districts in 9 governorates and reach for more ambitious approaches, aiming to safeguard climate resilience while promoting local economic development and trust between, on one hand, local authorities and citizens. The EU partnership with UNDP goes beyond financial assistance. EU, as a matter of fact, shares its knowledge with us. In Iraq, Lebanon and Libya, for example, municipalities engage in mutual learning and exchange with their European counterparts. This is an important example of solidarity across the region, which we hope will continue going forward. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the EU has not hesitated to work with the UNDP to roll out large programs in the Arab state region and to help mitigate the exploding vulnerability of communities. In Iraq, for example, we had a public information campaign with the EU called Let's Beat the Corona, boosted awareness of good health practices by reaching an estimated 31 million people with important messages. We remain committed to continue our joint work with the EU to advance sustainable inclusive development across the Arab state region and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention.
Today it is a pleasure for me to address the EU UNDP workshop on local approaches to resilience, stability and recovery. On the 9th of February, the EU has adopted the joint communication on a renewed partnership with the Southern Neighbourhood, a new agenda for the Mediterranean. In a region that has been hit hard by COVID-19, our common motto is build resilience together, especially for the most vulnerable. Local authorities actually know what that means, because they manage crisis on a daily basis and their contribution is often testament to the power of resilience. They are central to the sustainability of our support, be it in Lebanon, Libya or elsewhere. Local authorities have also a key role to play in countries or regions where central government legitimacy and support is disrupted. A good example for that is the MREP program in Lebanon, or also the UNDP-led activities in Libya, financed by the EU through the North Africa window of the EU Trust Fund for Africa. They are of key importance to build up this legitimacy. We have basically three ambitions that we want to carry forward in the next couple of years together with you. First is supporting local governments' systems to identify the need of the populations in a participatory manner, promoting a more accountable and efficient use of resources and planning. Second, strengthening local service delivery and enhance access to basic services to the most vulnerable groups. And third, reinforcing resilience by promoting local development, supporting livelihoods, and enabling a better environment for economic recovery. To give you another example, in response to the pandemic and the Beirut port blast, we created a municipal hotline mechanism in the immensely affected Burj Hammoud municipality that allowed residents, including the ones with disabilities, to report issues linked to COVID-19, damaged buildings, and soon also to go into mediation efforts. Over the next couple of months, as we operationalize the new agenda for the Mediterranean, we will connect the dots between your priorities, our priorities, and the best way to go forward to implement both of them. With that, I wish you a very successful workshop and have a nice day.
Real and lasting peace requires giving power to local people. We need to provide the local population with the tools to build consensus around what they know to be their key development and recovery priorities. Local peace builders, insider mediators, as well as local dialogue and conflict resolution mechanisms play an imperative role in conflict transformation and are essential for any sustainable approaches. We need integrated area-based solutions that work with different governance partners, including the private sector and civil society. Engagement with the private sector, especially micro, small, and medium enterprises, is essential to generate much needed and sustainable economic recovery opportunities. For this to happen, our interventions need to understand and support central, local, and horizontal relationships. The EU and UNDP have a long-standing and strong partnership in this field, and all EU UNDP programs are underpinned by a comprehensive analysis to ensure that our interventions are sensitive to conflict risks. In the coming hours, we will get to hear EU and UNDP experiences and success stories from designing and implementing programs in conflict, post-conflict, and protracted crisis settings that put local approaches to resilience, stability, and recovery at the center. We will also get to participate in the post-inception phase launch ceremony of strengthening institutional and economic resilience in Yemen, SIERI, a project designed to buttress the resilience of local governance systems in Yemen to reinforce the resilience and recovery of conflict-affected communities. Excellencies, distinguished speakers, and participants from all around the world, colleagues, friends, and partners. It is my great pleasure to again welcome you all and to kick off the Placing Local System at the Center conversation.
We can't hear you, Nida.
Thank you, Mohammed. I was welcoming you all back and to our first exchange session on common approaches and lessons learned for strengthening local systems and communities in Lebanon and Libya. The first half of this 1-hour session will include presentations and interventions from UNDP Lebanon and Libya and their respective EU counterparts. During the second half of the session, the floor will be open for discussion. You are all invited and encouraged to engage in the discussion, and we also invite you to switch on your cameras so that you can be part of a mosaic of video images that will create a more lively and dynamic feel of being in a live audience. I'll provide further instructions on how to ask for the floor when we open up for discussion. And for now, we will begin the session with a short video from UNDP Lebanon, followed by a presentation by UNDP Deputy Resident Representative for Lebanon, Mr. Mohammed Saleh. Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you, Nida. Good morning. So first, this is a video, I think, yeah? So colleagues, can you screen the video?
للاسف يعني انه نحن صرنا بالقرن ال21 وبعد في مطارح صرف صحي ما فيها، مش مطارح، لاكثر المطارح على مستوى الجنوب بالاخص بالبيسريه. ما كان في مجال من امكانيه انه نعمل شيء من هذا الصرف الصحي، فكان بصراحه يعني في انقاذ لنا وللناس وللبيئه وللصحه. بحدود 300 وحده سكنيه هاو استفادوا من المشروع، بالاضافه للسوري اللي قاعد كمان بهذه المنطقه.
كنا نحن بحالة مش قادرين ندفع فاتورة الكهرباء، فصرنا عم نتغذى بالطاقة الشمسية بدون دفع فاتورة كهرباء.
جينا اليوم قلنا ما نفكر بآليات بطرق بوسائل بتساعد البلدية تكون محفز اقتصادي، تكون وسيط للتماسك الاجتماعي، وتكون عم تلعب دور فاعل بضبط الأمن بأشكال غير عنفية يحترم القانون، لأنه إذا ما عملت هذا الدور البلدية السوريين واللبنانيين لن يكونوا مسالمين في المرحلة الأولى، في خطر إنه ما يكونوا مسالمين، لأنه الناس تقدر تحول لمستوى ما.
بالبداية واجهت صعوبات كتير كبيرة. من الصعوبات إنه العالم ما كانت تقبضني جد. أنا كمسؤولة الشرطة بالبلدية اشتغلت إني أكون حد الناس، اسمع لمشاكلهم ونجرب نحلها ضمن الأنظمة والقوانين. هذا الشيء ترجم لأفعال باقي الشرطة البلدية، بس الناس شافت نتيجة أفعالنا تقبلت إنه مسؤولة الشرطة تكون هي أنثى.
أكبر هم على المزارع العكاري هو وعبء عليه هو بس بده يطلع الإنتاج.
حوالي 800 ل 900 مزارع كلهم مستفيدين.
همنا الأساسي يبقى المزارع مرتبط بأرضه وبشجرة التفاح،
ما يهجر ويروح على المدينة ويصير عبء.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning once again. So again, if you can also screen the presentation, the slides, I will just start. Good morning again. So before we go to the main parts of the slide, it is useful to provide you with background and context of the country. So as we all know, Lebanon is in a multifaceted and protracted crisis, which has put stress on its already very fragile political context and constrained resources, while increasing this human vulnerability dramatically and rapidly. The country is also facing worst economic and its fiscal and financial crisis in its history. The local currency, or Lebanese pound, has lost 85% of its value. Inflation reached 150%. So you can imagine the context is deteriorating rapidly in the country. So the COVID-19 crisis also, with weak institutional response, puts a huge responsibility on municipalities. And another additional crisis is the aftermath of Beirut port blast on the 4th of August 2020. The country is also the largest host country of refugees in per capita terms. Municipalities on the front lines are hampered from responding to basic and urgent needs because mainly they depend on the National Municipal Fund, which has not allocated resources since 2019. So poverty has nearly doubled since 2019 to 55%, and extreme poverty has tripled to 23%. The rise of inter and intra-communal tensions present a risk for social stability and peace. The main concerns of the population and drivers of growing conflict and security risks are unemployment and economic situations, sectarian and political divides, lack of electricity. So to the next slide, please. So our focus with all these challenges and context, rapidly deteriorating economic conditions, our focus in Lebanon is mainly UNDP is prioritizing support to municipalities with explicit focus on conflict sensitivity, reduction of tensions, social inclusion, and support to the most vulnerable and affected communities. This is through enhancing access, livelihoods, and economic recovery. Our focus on leveraging livelihood interventions, assessment of value chains, and market needs, linking to cash for work and opportunities for longer-term benefits, economic growth, and linking services through creation of economic opportunities. Another intervention that UNDP Lebanon supports is strengthening basic service delivery in under-reserved areas through inclusive processes. This support is based on participatory engagement of citizens and refugees in planning, decision-making, and monitoring, and ranges from strengthening critical community infrastructure. This is basically the communities are participating from the designing up to the implementation of the project. So another support of UNDP Lebanon in local development is supporting long-term stability and service delivery by introducing environmentally sound local solutions. As you have seen it from the video, this is also another program. Next slide, please. So we have also working at local level. Next slide. Enhancing community security and access to justice. So our approach is economic recovery, human rights, enhancing community security. So it's an integrated local development approach. So through this community security and access to justice, UNDP is supporting the transformation of municipal police into a professional, human rights centered and accountable community policing. We introduced it also at local level as part of the integrated local development approach, promoting delivery of legal aid at the local level to safeguard the rights of women, refugees, and other vulnerable groups as an instrument of social cohesion and stability. Next slide. So I'm just giving you the highlights. So another UNDP's intervention is we are scaling up area-based support in Lebanon as this approach enabled integrated, comprehensive, and flexible responses to complex development contexts and problems which can be geographically defined. We link spatial planning and local economic recovery to the role that local and municipal authorities can play in facilitating integrated planning across the spectrum of security, social, economic, and environmental needs with a focus on inclusion. UNDP takes a risk-informed, conflict-sensitive approach to create an enabling environment for effectiveness of all local levels intervention and promote social stability. We do this by tailoring all our area-based interventions to the specificity of different geographic areas based on the analysis of Lebanon crisis response plan, supporting the long-term effort of building institutional drive-in accountability by supporting also the national anti-corruption strategy and putting an emphasis on advocacy with ministries on public administration issues. Next slide. So UNDP's approach to local development in Lebanon is our approach emphasizes processes for participatory planning, decision-making, and accountability at local level. For example, through our mechanisms for stability and local development, it has been implemented in over 80% of the most vulnerable communities. We engage the most vulnerable and marginalized groups, such as women, youth, migrants, refugees, and the people with disabilities to rebuild inclusive, sustainable local economies. So finally, UNDP is addressing the challenge of promoting the sustainability of local solutions in a range of context-specific ways by testing the scope to build the new public-private partnership and engaging the diaspora, building community-based practice of social accountability by monitoring service delivery for vulnerable populations, by promoting mechanisms for horizontal and vertical integration of the activities, including by engaging line ministries in the analysis of the local needs. So thank you so much. So this is briefly from my side. So I apologize on behalf of Celine, my resident representative. She was not able to make it today. So that's why I'm stepping in on this meeting. Thank you so much again.
Thank you to you, Mohammed. And to complement your presentation, allow me to introduce Mr. Jose Luis Vinuesa, Head of the Economic Sector of the EU Delegation to Lebanon. Over to you, Jose, for your reactions.
No, thank you. I think, can you hear me well? Yes, okay. Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you attending the conference today, but especially to the UNDP colleagues with whom we work in several fields, and we enjoy quite a very, let's say, productive contribution and collaboration in Lebanon. Maybe I would just several aspects which are important. I find important maybe to put up front today. I mean, the European Union already in the strategy devised for the 4 years of 2017 to 2020 already signaled as one of the 3 focal sectors for our intervention local development, improvement of socio-economic conditions at local level. We saw this already with the Syrian crisis hitting hard the country, with already several years after the massive influx of refugees, when their state was foreseen to continue, seeing that especially because the refugees in Lebanon, in difference what is happening in Jordan or Turkey, located throughout the country and not in any specific refugee camp, but they were basically absorbed throughout the geography of Lebanon, some areas more than others, but basically when you see the presence of refugees in the country, they are scattered throughout, and basically people finding their way of living either in barren lands or empty dwellings that they would either occupy or rent. This then put to the forefront of who basically takes care of the or who basically has the burden of the presence of refugees would be the municipalities. Municipalities which were in any case in already quite a weak state, on a country that should progress on a decentralization process but has not moved on it, that was not providing neither finances or other resources for the municipalities to be able to wear the burden. So seeing these two, seeing it from those two aspects. One, the fact that municipalities would bear the load of hosting the refugees, and also trying to make sure that the decentralization agenda is not forgotten in the country. That municipalities are reinforced and they are able to develop and to be really a place of reference for citizens at local level, especially at the peripheral areas. This led to us to mark this as one of our focal sectors. And funding, meaning programs, among them the ones we have in partnership with the UNDP, have come from both the envelopes that we have for bilateral cooperation, but also from the envelopes that we have that are targeted for the consequences of the Syrian crisis. So we have been supporting municipalities from those two aspects. It's our bilateral development program with Lebanon, but also knowing that they would bear the costs of the presence of refugees, and they would need reinforcement. We have worked basically with many partners, among them UNDP, and our programs are always articulated among three main pillars. One is increasing the planning capacities of the municipalities. In general, increasing capacities at municipal level, but very specifically on planning capacities, and making also promoting engagement of municipalities with local actors, be it citizens themselves, but definitely community-based organizations or civil society organizations as well. Another pillar of our support to municipalities has been strengthening the basic service delivery at local level, mainly water, solid waste, but also capacities of municipalities to provide for other type of services, both to Lebanese or to refugees, be it legal services, social assistance, or in some cases even including social protection schemes within municipalities that would be able to cater for. A third pillar has been, and this is quite important as well, together with the basic service delivery, but the capacity of municipalities to be able to promote local development, and in that sense, private sector livelihoods opportunities, able to create and to offer jobs at local level in order to decrease any risks for tension and tensions arising, especially between refugees and local Lebanese. The problem we have, what we have seen in Lebanon is that in the last 4 years that me and my colleagues have been witnessing, constant deterioration of the conditions in the country. Apart from already the country suffering the shock of and having to cope with the presence of refugees and all the consequences on the economy of the Syria crisis, meaning cutting the trade routes and therefore the economy suffering, less jobs being created. The COVID-19 and the economic, financial and political crisis that the country is suffering is putting more and more pressure. One question I have for the debate, for example, for those who have been on the field and are implementing the programs, the question I have is that we have been working for years on increasing capacity at municipal level and looking at local level as a place for reducing, to diminish the risk for increasing tensions and instability. My question to those practitioners who have been on the field is that we have been working for years, and that work has led to better capacity at local level to absorb the subsequent shocks that we have had in the country. And since October 2019 and the spiraling crisis in the country, and therefore after COVID-19, and the explosion at the port, the disaster was very affecting a very specific area, but at the end of the day, the whole country suffered. Have we been able to support and to reinforce at the right levels so the local level was better prepared in the advent of the COVID-19 crisis or the spiraling crisis in the country? Have been able to cope better? Can we claim that there have been results of so many years of support that we have been giving? I think this is a valid question that we need to ask. Or are we just piling up support because local level is never able to respond? Yeah? This would be one of my questions. And the other reflection I wanted to leave open, because I don't have an answer, is the whole issue of the decentralization agenda, because it's good that we keep continuing supporting the local level. We keep pumping funding, trainings, funds for local investments, local infrastructure, dynamizing the local economy, be it agriculture, agribusiness. All the sectors that are that have a let's say a potential at local level. But with all of that, we thought that we would also pull progress on the decentralization agenda, and we understand very well that this is, of course, a very political move. It will only come when the central level wants to progress on the decentralization agenda. But we thought that all of these local dynamics would eventually convince and pull the interest of the decision makers in Beirut to progress on the decentralization agenda, something which has not happened in the last years. So will our support be able to be a trigger or a pull factor for the decentralization agenda? This would be my two open reflections that I wanted to put to the floor. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Jose. And in the interest of time, I will move directly to the next segment. We'll now show a short video from UNDP Libya, followed immediately by a presentation by UNDP resident representative in Libya, Mr. Gerardo Noto. Over to you, Gerardo, beginning with the video.
Thank you. عبد اللطيف قصة الصديق الزميل الناجح، طور منا المشروع الخاص متاعه اللي مدعوم من UNDP. الشغل متاعه وجد في بيئة العمل في تطوير الأبحاث كل ما يلزم من كماليات البيئية باش إنه هو يكمل الشغل متاعه، من مهندسين، من زملاء عمل.
طبعا بعد ما وصلت لمرحلة أني نقدر ندير تطبيقات اللي أنا نبيها مثلا، وصلت لمرحلة متقدمة من برمجة التطبيقات، وصلت لمرحلة ملل، يعني عندي إمكانيات لكن مش عارف نستفيد منها. فبالصدفة وأنا أتصفح في الإنترنت لقيت كتاب عنوانه الموهبة وحدها لا تكفي. فمن هنا بدأت عقليتي تتغير من ناحية الانتربرونورشيب. خلاص بعدها قررت اني ندير تطبيق، بندير حاجة نستفيد منها انا شخصيا، يستفيدوا منها المجتمع. درت بيفت للفكرة متاعي الاولى، خليتها مركزة على الاكل. فمن هنا جت فكرة وجبات، اللي هو تطبيق الناس تقدر تطلب منها الاكل المفضل متاعها عن طريق الابليكيشن. هو تطبيق وجبات اللي هو الزبون يقدر يتصفح قائمة المطاعم ويتصفح الأصناف اللي في المطاعم ويجي الدليفري لعند الحوش. نعاود خيرا.
بانا أكثر في الأزمة هذه أن الناس ما عادش قادرة تطلع، أغلب المطاعم والمقاهي تسكرت. الناس لجأت للابليكيشنز أو لجأت للتليفونات في هي تاخذ طلباتها.
وجبات يخدم في أزمة كورونا كيف ما نعرف، وجبات كيف كل التطبيقات اللي حافظا على التباعد الاجتماعي الأقصى، لأنه نحن ما نكونوش داخل تجمعات، داخل مكان واحد مثل المطاعم أو المقاهي أو كذا. وجبات حاول يتسارع ويتجاوب في جائحة كوفيد 19 بحيث أنه يكون هو بشكل إيجابي، بحيث أنه يوصل الطلبات للمنزل بطريقة آمنة وسهلة، بحيث أنه يقلل خروج الأشخاص.
Thank you. Thank you. This is just one example of the many interventions more related, in this case, to economic inclusion of youth and women innovation in partnership with Tatweer Foundation, an entity working from Benghazi but covering the whole country. Let me put in context, because when we reflect, when we think about the role of the local government into this crisis and conflict and post-conflict countries, I like to dedicate a few minutes I have try to contextualize and what the role and how in the different phases of this evolution in this country the local dimension plays. First of all, you know, Libya is a country that has been through crisis for the last 10 years. Conflict, unconflict, divisions. Fortunately, it's good to see that this is changing significantly. And the UN and UNDP, in partnership with the European Union and many EU members, has been playing a significant role into that process. First of all, let me thank you, the European Union, for being our main partner. In the case of UNDP in Libya, as many of our offices in the region, they work together with the European Union represent more than 60% of the program implemented in the country. A lot more when you consider European Union members. The program in our case has two main components. On one hand, one pillar on governance, institution building, which is implemented together with the mission. It's very important because it looks into the peace process, institutions at the national and local level. And it's the other side of the program is looking into stabilization and resilience and economic inclusion efforts. And I think it's very important to look at that in an integrated way. Let me just go quickly more details in terms of numbers. The programs are in the presentation. But let me say, first of all, regarding the peace building process, as you know, the conference in Berlin at the beginning of 2020 set the framework, involved the key international and regional actors, and frame a Libyan-led process. The conflict continued for some months at the beginning of 2020, unfortunately evolved and stopped around June. But of course, the conditions were not ready for advances. But after many months of negotiations and the Libyans were able to agree, facilitated by the UN, on a ceasefire in Geneva at the end of October. That opened the road for the rest of to move forward the rest of the tracks on the economic track. That allowed lifting the oil embargo, recovering income to the country, reunification of institutions, the central bank, and the exchange rate. And then definitely moving to the political track, the most sensitive conflict, complex in a way. But after the very important meeting of the Libyan Political Development Forum in November in Tunis, a roadmap was agreed with a very clear objective of celebrating national elections in December 2021 and creating a transitional reunified government. Government that after a few months of negotiation agreed on the selection process, another meeting early February in Geneva, facilitated by hosted by the government of Switzerland and facilitated by the UN and UNDP. And the result, as you know, a reunified government, the government of national unity was elected, a presidential council with 3 members representing the 3 regions, a very important inclusive dimension, and a separate government headed by the prime minister. This government has and was fortunately endorsed by the parliament, the House of Representatives a couple of weeks ago, and the government was in turn in a very smooth, peaceful, and quite example process. But then, as I say, it's very important that after many, many years, the institutions are working again. The parliament not only holds session for the endorsement of the government, but also now is discussing the budget, appointing a key position in what is called the sovereign institution. So the institutional part of the process is moving. Of course, many challenges. The ceasefire implementation is moving forward, but a lot more to do. Important to underline that, as I say, Libya now has one reunified government, but the problems that we have in Libya yesterday are the same problems that Libya has today. So there is a much better institutional framework, but there's still a lot of support and effort by the Libyans in first place, and international community in the UN system, of course the EU at the same time. The other part of the program, how we work with local, how to contribute to stabilization and resilience, and definitely there, the local governments are a key partner. One, because it's one of the few, particularly in the peak of the conflict, it was one of the few institutions really working, delivering, and need a lot of support to access resources, to access technical assistance, and that has been provided by international community, bilateral actors, the UN and UNDP definitely play a very important role, interacting with more than 65 municipalities, more than half of the total municipalities in the country, where more than 85% of population lives, from the big cities and urban conglomerates to medium and smaller cities. I think it's very important to look at the two sides of the program, because what we've been able to generate, or at least to contribute to generate at the local level, were conditions allowing for the peace building process. And I think this is a point which is very important to have in mind. It's not just because at the end of the day, during that particular divided government, lack of capacity, even lack of control on big part of the territory and the divided administration, the role of the municipalities was fundamental, but at the same time has allowed to create those conditions on the ground with participatory process, with providing basic services in key sectors Of course, health, education, health particularly prioritized with the pandemic since last year, but health, education, energy, water and sanitation, solid waste management, key issues to make recovery at the local level essential. One thing I would like to strengthen is the following. When we think and work with the local level, it's not just the local level against or instead of the central level. And particularly, I think there was a lot of focus on the local level as I say, facing a divided government, lack of capacity, lack of allocation of resources to provide those services. But I think it's very important to look into the interaction between the macro level or the central level and the local level. And in that regard, despite the division, there were elements of national institutions. Companies in electricity and water and sanitation, provision of services for solid waste management, with different level of regionalization, localization, even though the structure remained national. Some ministries, again, with certain level of regionalization and division, with certain components that were crossing and including the whole country. So I think that heterogeneity, which is also dynamic, I think when we look at what we were doing before and what is coming now, within this what we can call reunified transition phase during 2021, is that the reconstitution of the reunification of the central level will require a continuous support at the local level, which are the very key institutional actor, as a local actors, to provide services and generate what we can call peace dividends. But at the same time, this phase requires a significant effort in terms of reunification of the central institutions and fortifying the decentralization process. So that complex approach, I think, is very important. The same when we look into the governance institutional side of the support and the resilient economic inclusion. And at the same time, this is not a picture, it's like a movie, because we are moving into continue working at the local level, even increasing the capacities in terms of resources and human resources and all the capacity building and the conflict management and prevention that requires. And on the other hand, fortifying, creating, more than creating effective institutions at the central level and how those two levels work together. The other dimension I would like to mention is the conflict in the country. For everybody look at Libya and have seen the division between the East and the West and the two governments, one recognized in the South and the particular structural conditions in the South. What is important is the peace process has advanced and hopefully will continue to advance and consolidate, but there is a lot of local conflicts. Most relevant probably is the Misrata Tawerga case, where the whole city has been IDP and now it's slowly coming back. But those conflicts in the different ethnic groups, different tribes, are present in most of the communities in Libya. We can look into Darna or Ashtavia in the east, or Sabrata, or the Fusa Mountains in the west. Or Mursuk and Kufra in the south. So when we look into how we continue the support in this particular phase of transition, even though reunified, we had to look at particular focus. And the way we work with the EU and different intervention is that level, not only in terms of stabilization and resilience, but also in terms of reconciliation, support to local election processes, I think has been implemented and it has to continue. Let me just very quickly, so we can open up the floor for discussion. First, when we look until 2021, the Government of National Unity has clear priorities. First, and all the national election that we are supporting with the mission, the National Electoral Commission. The EU members, the EU is playing a significant role, not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of political support, as well as the continued support of the local election committee to expand those elections, more than 40 in the last 2 years, to the east and completing the process in the west. The other one is definitely health and the response to the pandemic, and then basic services and energy, electricity, which is a very critical need, require massive investment. A lot has been allocated in the budget, at least in the draft budget sent to the Congress. And the UN and actors, different international actors are playing a role in that fundamental. But the same is just of health and education and water and sanitation. And two dimensions, I mentioned reunification of institutions, which is a long-term agenda, but it has to move forward in the next, hopefully during 2021. And the decentralization process has to do with the fairness and allocation of resources, and the local level will play, not only, but will play a significant role into that process. Very quick mentioning in Article 42 of the Berlin Declaration, there is a reference what is called the Reconstruction and Development Mechanism, a mechanism to really fund and implement not only the stabilization process and what we can call extended stabilization, moving from the community level support to the more regional and national infrastructure, but also in terms of the funding. We have to rely more and more on Libyan funding, but does not imply immediate stopping of international funding that, particularly in the 1 or 2 years, 21 and 22, are fundamental. What we can bring to the table, definitely an inclusive way to implement the reconstruction and development process, implementation in timely delivery, which is one important challenge for the state institution, as well as transparency and accountability. So when we look, again, just to conclude, we are looking, when we think about the role of local governments in the capacity building of the public institution, not only in the local government, and one dimension I think important to underline, at least in the case of Libya, but I think probably similar in other countries, there is at the local level, there is a generation of innovative, younger and committed elite in terms of political and social leaders. And I think it's very important also to cultivate that new leadership as a way to renew and to generate interesting process of dynamism for change that will not happen overnight, but I think it's a very important thing to consider. So the work that we do in terms of infrastructure rehabilitation is not only for the bricks, as I say, it's also a reconstruction of the social fabric and the consideration of how to manage conflict, how to use this intervention to generate or regenerate social cohesion, particularly where most deepest divisions are fundamental. And Oker told all the chapter on economic inclusion and security, where this intervention, these programs together with the EU has been executed. And I think very important, we are about to inaugurate one example of the effort looking into police, security sector reform, a police station built with the support of EU, but not only in terms of the building, but also all the mechanism and security, economic inclusion, and reconstruction, infrastructure, and provision of basic services, and the fundamental in this transitional phase, as well as all institutional and being able to conduct the political, secure the political condition and security condition for holding election at the end of the year. I will stop here just to underline that how we look into the role of the local governments in relation with national structure, how we look into the governance side of the support into economic stabilization and reconstruction, and the dynamic movement of these interactions along the different phases of the conflict. Hopefully in the case of Libya, moving to a post-conflict, but still with many challenges in which the role of the international community, the role of the EU in so many levels, and of course the partnership that we have with the UN and UNDP are fundamental. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerardo. And to complement your presentation, I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Sandra Goffin, Head of Operations of the EU delegation to Libya. Sandra, over to you for your reactions.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Gerardo for his presentation. made with a lot of passion and knowledge, and that's I think you've said a lot, Gerardo. I mean, I will focus maybe on a few points. But first of all, I mean, I want to acknowledge the achievements of UNDP in Libya, which is a very important development partner, and also acknowledge the good relationship that are existing between the UNDP committed staff and the EU delegation in Libya. So the scope of the partnership is quite high in Libya. I mean, financially, we are talking about 70 million euros all in all on different types of instruments, including the EU Trust Fund. And you know that migration is a very important topic when it comes to Libya, and so a lot of funds are coming from the trust fund as well, and this is an entry point that is quite significant in Libya. I mean, the main cooperation with UNDP in Libya is indeed focusing on local development, which is used as a way to stabilize the country and support at the same time the most vulnerable segment of the population. But of course, I mean, we have to look where we are operating in which context. This local development support has been done in the last years in a country poor in a way, divided state, two governments with a very little control over territories. And a very large disconnect between local authorities and central government, and I understand that this is across different country in crisis. It's not peculiar to Libya, but this disconnect between central and local authorities is really crucial and has to be addressed. I think, Gerardo, you made it very clear. There has not been really a national strategy for local development so far. The decentralization is decided, but it's not implemented, or it's very partially implemented, and local authorities do not have the resources to implement their mandate in a way. There's also something that is important is that there's a lack of efficient system of data and statistic collections, which makes very hard to assess needs and monitor action and their impact on the ground, and which also makes difficult to really have an effective and sustainable, I would say, global action at local level. Nevertheless, this being said, we have really to acknowledge that supporting local authorities has been very relevant in Libya, both in terms of resilience and support to the population. It's fully appropriate to continue to support those local actors and to support at the same time the decentralization process, to support the population, to support the peace process and reconstruction process. But there are many challenges, as you have understood. We have to certainly to strengthen our future action. I mean, in this partnership with UNDP, to reconnect local level and national level, and not only to have this localized approach that in a way was the only option that we had in the past. And now there's new prospects. We have this new process, this new government, and I would say the very important point as well is that Libya has resources, and this will certainly make things I mean, easier than in contexts where those resources are not present. The important point I want to insist on is really the Libyan ownership of local development. This is essential. As I said, there has not been a national strategy for local development, no decentralization, no resources. But nevertheless, when we will continue to design this local development support, we have to make sure that we have Libyan ownership and Libyan priorities. This might take some time, but this is essential for the sustainability, which has been probably lacking up to now. I would like also to make a point on the difficulty to measure the impact of all the local development action that have been implemented by UNDP by other organizations and partially supported by the EU. So the measurement of the impact is very difficult, and we have to work on that. How these measures have impacted on touching all, I mean, in an inclusive way, the population, the women, the girls, the youth, which is an extremely important target group. We've seen that there has been some initiative on creating jobs and livelihood. This is very good. This is working. We see that it's working, but it has to be expanded. And overall, we have to put in place tools to measure how the impact of all these actions are implemented. On the best practice and approach, I think it's also of utmost importance to tailor-made action according to the local Libyan context. I think there is a lot of similarity with other countries that are in crisis situation, but at the same time, each context is very peculiar, and we have to make sure that we carefully address the situation with the peculiarity of the context. I just take an example: cash for work can work maybe in a country like Yemen or Iraq. In Libya, it might be different. Standard of living are different. Resources are different. And we have to make really a careful analysis before implementing any action. On the way forward, certainly we are looking at continuing to partner with UNDP and other organizations present in the country for empowering local authorities, communities, and local actors, and link it up with national democratic governance. I would like really to stress also the importance of the relationship between the citizens and the local authorities that have to be carefully looked at, as well as the civil society organization. It was mentioned also, I think, by the representative of the UNDP, how important it is to link the Libyan municipalities and the European ones. This is something that is going to be continued because it's also bringing added value. It's important to connect all work that is going to be done with viable local development plans. Again, this link to the Libyan ownership. And increase the implication of the private sector. UNDP has very good example with Toyota. This has to be expanded. The diaspora is also certainly an avenue to explore more. There are opportunities existing to support the local development. UNDP is the co-chair of the governance group over the overarching coordination mechanism for international donors in Libya. It's called GTCC. It's a very important fora, and we really value this fora. We are ready to support this work, and it would be very important to understand what are the next steps. What is UNDP visions for its future programming in Libya as well, and how to connect it with the issue of national ownership. Let me just finish by saying that the EU-UNDP partnership in Libya will continue with even a new program that is being finalized for the south of Libya now, and all the other programs that are ongoing and that are very important in the current context to support the new situation, the peace process, and the hopefully reconstruction process. It's a great chance for Libya and for the way we can support the future partnership in this context. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra. And I'd like to open the floor. We have about 10 minutes for discussion. If you would like to intervene, participants, please indicate in the chat if you'd like to come in with a comment or a question, either for one of the speakers or for general discussion with all participants in the floor. And in the interest of time, kindly limit your interventions to under 2 minutes. To get us started, perhaps just to reflect on some of the points made by Jose and by Sandra, you might want to react to Jose's question about having been working on capacity building at the municipal level for many years. Has this meant that the local system is better able to cope with the intensity of the crises that have hit Lebanon? And from Sandra, how do we measure impact? Okay, I see we have Sabra who'd like to come in. Please come in, Sabra. Can we please unmute Sabra, or if you're able to do so on your end?
I apologize.
There we go.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity where we see EU and UNDP are highlighting their joint efforts. It's a great day for anybody, any organization that has been working in especially Libya, that sees some opportunity of collaboration. As gender concerns, we were fortunate to work with the UNDP to observe 2012 elections and then constitutional elections. And after that, we also work with EU for gender sensitive constitution. Somehow since 2014, we, like other international community members, we had to leave and we could never enter Libya. And today's discussion, when I'm hearing our EU and UNDP colleagues talking about places and their wonderful, wonderful work, it pains my heart for the exclusion that women organizations like Gender Concerns is suffering to enter to Lebanon and go back to Libya. So my question to you is there any scope, gentlemen, to include women organizations to work with grassroots organizations and national institutions in Libya, where we have track record of cooperation and collaboration and guidance from UNDP and EU both? Thank you so much.
Would Sandra or Gerardo like to respond to the question?
Definitely. I like if, no, we are working in terms of gender and equality, women empowerment. We had not just in the program that we developed with the EU, also a special intervention with the UN Women supporting NGOs working with women and youth in different dimensions. And now we, in terms of the economic inclusion initiative, there is always a very strong focus on women. Not just in terms of the training and innovation, but also in terms we've been supporting new small and medium enterprises with a particular focus on the ones led by women and covering the whole country. More than 45 received some small grant and training in an initiative launched last year. Beyond the thousands of young women and men training in entrepreneurship and innovation, something that we quickly show in the video. But now this year, we would like to continue not only into that work, but also working on the political participation. We are supporting the municipal council, not just in the election, also in post-electoral support. And there are at least one woman in each, and we are working particularly to strengthen their capacities. But we are looking into more participation in terms of voters that has been shown certain not fully satisfactory numbers in the local election process, but also as candidates. And the good sign is that there was a declaration in the Tunis Libyan Political Development Forum by women, 17 out of the 75 represented there, for the 30% participation at different levels of decision making. The current cabinet has appointed 5 women out of 26, so we'll say roughly 20%. It's not yet 30, or of course far for 50%, but it's a good sign that for the first time, Women Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Justice, And I think that shows a good, but there's still a long way to go. Let me just quickly refer to some of the issues, very short. When we look into capacity development, we've been making efforts, and I think we should continue. Two things. There are issues that should accompany, strengthening the capacity to take more and more responsibility, not only basic services, interaction with citizens, different level of the legitimacy between citizen and public institutions. But I think there are issues that we should look into the short term, but also look into the medium and long term. The other issue in capacity development is we look into a lot into individual capacity. And I think there is more to be done in that regard. But what I found in Libya is when it comes to organizational, institutional capacity, that has to do with system, with mechanism, with rules, and with the capacity to implement them, there the capacity is very, very low. And of course, it's different from let's say, municipality to municipality or ministry to ministry. But I think that dimension of the organizational, institutional capacity is something that we have to look in connection with the individual capacity development. Measure impact. Yes, a lot more to do. Of course, we can say, which is true, access is because of security and the difficulty to access certain places in the south or even in the east. Still, we cannot go to Sirte from Tripoli. It has to be open, the road. But does not exclude that we had to do a more systematic. And again, what Sandra said is, data generation and analysis is a big black hole. And we are working now with the Census Bureau and other initiative with the broadband. We are looking into RPVA, different mechanisms to generate, analyze data, which is kind of a dark room in a lot. And so to measure, we had to see where we are moving. And again, I think there is some interesting effort by international NGOs, and more, we should develop capacity for the national actors that are on the ground and that will ensure measuring and really improving the implementation. Final point, in a conflict country, a lot of things are lost. And one that we not always are aware or putting at the top priority is the long-term vision. Because, you have to survive next day. You need water and food and that things. But I think one of the challenges is now to try to help the Libyans to look and to think about what kind of a model, what kind of a country, what kind of development they are looking for. And I think for that, I've been engaging with universities, but in other think tanks, but I think that role, bringing in experience from other countries in the region, other countries, to help them to take the time to think in the national development vision and national development plan, accompany all this process of transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerardo. And unfortunately, colleagues, we are out of time. There is a question from Angelica at IOM, which I will take into the next session because it's relevant across both sessions. Thank you once again, Mohammed, Jose, Gerardo, and Sandra for your thoughtful presentations. We're going to take a shorter break. Unfortunately, we will be breaking for 5 minutes to be back here at 11 a.m. Brussels time to respect the time also of those who are presenting in the next session. I do apologize for having to cut the discussion period short. If I could just ask you during this pause to take a few moments to answer a Slido survey question by scanning the QR code that is up on your screen or using the URL and the number that have been shown. All of those responses will be anonymous, but the responses will actually be shown with the rest of the group and will feed into our panel session that comes after both exchanges. So we'll see you back here at 11 a.m. Brussels time in about 5 minutes, 3 minutes, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, colleagues. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
so warm in July. Questions are resting. We don't ask why. We don't like nothing. We have each other. You are much more than a friend and a lover. Heavenly showers, so warm in July. We feel like children. Once again, you and I. You and I. You and I. Slumbering softly, close to your heart. You know I loved you right from the start. Why do I love you? This I don't know. Why do the rivers continue to flow? Slumbering softly, close you and I. Love don't need reasons. Love don't ask why. Why? You and I. You and I. You and I. You and I. Love don't ask why. Love don't ask why. Heavenly showers, so warm in July. Questions are resting. We don't ask why.
Welcome back, colleagues, and welcome to our second exchange session with a focus on Yemen and Iraq. The first half of this 1-hour session will include an intervention from the Head of Cooperation for the EU delegation to Yemen, followed by presentations by UNDP resident representatives in UNDP, Yemen, and Iraq. As before, during the second half of the session, the floor will be open for discussion, and colleagues presenting, to allow for discussion time, please do try to keep your interventions as brief as possible. We begin today with an intervention from Ms. Carolina Hedstrom, Head of Cooperation for the EU delegation to Yemen. Carolina, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here today to share some of our experience with you of placing the local at the center through our partnership with UNDP in Yemen. And I wanted to start by mentioning a few words about the EU's engagement in Yemen overall. For us, it's of critical importance that our engagement in Yemen rests on three mutually supportive areas of engagement. We engage at the political level through humanitarian assistance and through development cooperation. This is very important because there aren't that many donors that actually do development cooperation in Yemen at the moment. But for us, this is absolutely fundamental to what we want to achieve in Yemen. We consider that the complex situation in Yemen can only be addressed with a deliberate humanitarian development peace nexus approach. Understandably, at the moment, a lot of the public focus and the media focus when we talk about Yemen is on the humanitarian crisis. It is indeed the world's worst humanitarian crisis, and the humanitarian needs are enormous. And in particular, people need all kinds of basic services, health, education, food security, etc. But in the long run, and as our humanitarian colleagues know very well, it is not sustainable or even possible at the moment with the means that we have to meet those needs through humanitarian aid or outside support. So we need to support Yemeni efforts to strengthen their own institutions and systems to ensure basic service delivery and to restart the economy. This is an absolutely essential step to lay the foundations for longer-term sustainable development. There's also a very clear link to peace and the political process. From the EU side, we are very much engaged in the political process and supportive of the UN-led peace process in Yemen, but we're also painfully aware that no peace agreement will be implementable or sustainable if people don't see progress in their daily lives. People need access to basic services, and they need to be able to earn an income in order to see a future for their country. So from the EU side, we are currently developing a medium-term 3-year strategic guidance document for our development cooperation with Yemen. This is a more ambitious approach than we've had before, and it's underpinned by a very strong statement that the EU believes in the future of Yemen. And we have a firm belief that it is worthwhile investing in the future of Yemen, not just meeting the needs of Yemen today. But of course, we are aware that we are operating in a very uncertain environment in Yemen. The political future of the country is still uncertain, but I think it's fairly clear that any future peaceful Yemen 5 or 10 years from now is unlikely to be as centralized as the country has been in the past. So that's one of the many reasons why we consider it essential to engage at the local level and strengthen capacities and systems at the local level. There is also a huge discrepancy between different parts of the country, and in order not to further destabilize and fragment the country, it's also important to address those inequalities and support local capacities where it's most needed. It's also a very difficult implementing environment and difficult for us as a donor with very limited presence on the ground. We are therefore very grateful to have UNDP as a key partner for the EU in Yemen, given UNDP's presence on the ground and working relationships with all the key stakeholders. This is essential in order to be able to identify these different local needs and to be able to identify what is possible and most relevant in different parts of the country. So I very much look forward to hearing Auke talk in more detail about what exactly our partnership is achieving on the ground in Yemen. And I'm also very happy that later on we will be able to present the latest EU UNDP initiative in Yemen, the Sierra project, to this wider audience. We feel this project is really an opportunity to help change the narrative on Yemen, to show that it's both possible, worthwhile, and absolutely essential to invest in the future of Yemen. And this project really has the potential to make a significant contribution in this regard. So with that, I'll look forward to Auke's remarks and to the discussion and any questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolina. And to complement your intervention, I'm pleased to invite UNDP resident representative in Yemen, Auke Lutzma, to take the floor. We'll begin initially with a short video from Yemen. If we could cue the video, please. Over to you, Auke.
Thank you very much indeed, and a great pleasure to have you all online, and it's my privilege to talk to you today. And just the video you just saw is actually one of the joint projects we have with the EU, but in fact we have quite a few. Let me just say a few things to start off with. I really was happy to hear Carolina speak to not only the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, but also the development crisis. According to our own statistics, Yemen has also basically become the worst development crisis in the world and becoming one of the poorest nations in the world, furthest away from the SDGs. Now, working together, UNDP and the European Union are guided by the same principles and are really aligned in a common vision to support all Yemenis. So it makes really sense, you know, that we have been able to forge a very strong and strategic partnership in and around Yemen. So in the last 5 years or so, the EU has provided UNDP Yemen with nearly 180 million euro, and really, I would say, impacting hundreds of thousands of lives across Yemen. The partnership that we have really enabled us to respond to Yemen's urgent and unique issues and to maximize immediate community impact. And together we really helped vulnerable people meet their most urgent needs while building resilience to future shocks. I'll give you a few examples. We strengthened citizen engagement by launching about 600 community initiatives that focus on providing key services. We enhanced local stability and solidarity by training 229 local mediators to help solve community conflicts that involve displaced communities, returnees, and host families. We also invested in human capital and local businesses by establishing over 4,000 micro businesses. We helped nearly 150,000 farmers in 232 communities gain food security and higher incomes through technical and capacity building. Our partnership in Yemen has restored services and livelihoods by employing around 30,000 people to rebuild vital community infrastructure. This includes maintaining 150 kilometers of roads, building and fixing 129 water systems, and 63 sanitation networks and 52 health facilities. And on top of that, we strengthened local governance through the established 223 village cooperative councils, as you saw in the video, and their community resilience plans that have benefited over 70,000 villages through construction projects. So building upon these successes, the largest EU-funded UNDP program in the Arab States region, which is called the Strengthening the Institutional, Strengthening the Institutional Economic Resilience in Yemen, SHERI, has been established. It will also support local governments in multiple districts across Yemen. So it is really evident that our partnership has had a significant impact across Yemen, from communities to individuals, and from rebuilding infrastructure to providing psychosocial support. And this really means that we are making a difference in Yemen. And this past year, we were deeply honored and very proud that one of our EU-supported projects received the esteemed Ashton Humanitarian Energy Award. This award brought much-needed international attention to the small frontline community microgrid solar project in Abs, which is an area in Yemen. This project is run by Iman Hadi and her team of 10 women owner-operators. And Iman has become an emblem of strength and prosperity for women across Yemen. She was selected as one of BBC's 100 most influential women in 2020 and has become a leader and pillar in her community. And Iman is even paying her good fortune forward by financing community micro business projects and advising others on successful business ventures. And this is a clear indication that our projects change people's lives and have an impact beyond those we directly touch. And as is illustrated by Iman's solar panel project, Yemen's wider recovery must also be green. And this is where the EU Green Deal is an important example to boost the efficient use of the country's resources by moving to a clean and circular economy, restoring biodiversity and cutting pollution. Yemen's recovery must include a transition to renewable energy, harness sustainable water management, restore local agriculture and fisheries, and repair critical infrastructure like airports and seaports. On Tuesday, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia announced a new initiative to end the Yemeni crisis and reach a comprehensive political solution. It's even more vital now that our partnership continue to focus on sustainable solutions and as we work to help Yemen rebuild from one of its darkest moments in history. And we look forward to continuing this work together, and we are indeed thankful for the successful and fruitful partnership with the EU. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Auke. And without interruption, I'm now pleased to invite UNDP resident representative in Iraq, Ms. Zeina Ali Ahmed, to take the floor, beginning with a short video on UNDP Iraq. So cueing the video, please, and then Zeina, over to you.
المعلومات الهائلة بالرغم من المنافع الأخرى مثل منفعة أنك ممكن تلاقي عمل بالإعلام، تلاقي فرص حياة أخرى. النشاط هو لدعم المجتمع المحلي للعراق.
اشتركت بهذه الدورة لأن أشوفها أنه هي فرصة لتنمية مواهبنا بالتصوير واكتساب اكسبيرينس يعني بمجال الصحافة والتصوير، حتى نكون إنه مؤهلين إنه نوثق الأحداث اللي تصير ببلدنا، فلازم نكون الناس أصحاب خبرات التصوير.
بتنمية مجتمعاتهم، دور بالمساهمة بوضع مسار العراق نحو مسار مستقر وآمن ومزدهر ومليء بالتنمية البشرية الإنسانية بكل مكوناتها، هو دور أساسي.
محافظتنا ولو بجزء قليل بنقل الحقيقة للعالم حتى يشوفون شنو هي محافظة ذيقار وشنو هي محافظة.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Thanks, Nada, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm sorry I can't put on my video because we have a very, very low bandwidth today in Iraq. But I know we have only 4 minutes, so I will try to be brief in the presentation. Let me start, please, by thanking the EU for the excellent partnership that we have with them in Iraq. Not only on the project that we will be presenting now, but even more on the stabilization agenda, the anti-corruption and the governance. However, let me do a spotlight, if I may, on one of our projects, which is the Local Area Development Program, that looks at an integrated area-based approach to looking at the issues at the local level. The program that we have with the EU is holistic, it is area-based, it is tailored for public service delivery coming from the local up to the national. It mainstreams conflict and cultural sensitivity in local development planning. And it aims very much at supporting local economic recovery at a multi-level approach. It's very good because it also builds on the earlier LADP 1 and 2 that we had in partnership with the EU. It builds on the priorities that have been put forward by the local communities, and it uses an EU integrated sectorial approach where we're trying to promote economic growth with social cohesion, as well as building trust among local communities. It's innovative, it is knowledge-based, it looks at sustainable job creation and puts women and youth at its heart. Next, please. Next slide. Yes. This is an overview of what the program aims to do. Next, please. The program has different interventions. One is the peer-to-peer cooperation between municipalities that are targeted in Iraq and those in Europe. The second looks very much at, as I said, local projects. So some of them look at urban beautification, some others look at ecotourism and conservation of marshlands and cultural heritage. Others have very much at their heart the issues related to renewable energy, energy supply in rural areas. And in the center of Iraq, where it was an area that was occupied by Daesh, ISIS, it looks very much at the restoration of public services. Next, please. Other components, other than the local projects, look at strengthening of local dialogue using civil society. So we've been working with the civil society within the country to look at innovative ideas. We are looking at partnership with the civil society so that we can have an alternative implementation modalities. Civil society should be able to bridge local demands to influence the policies. So that's the vertical integration. And through civil society, we're trying to ensure that the local voices are heard. The third component that's very important is donor coordination, where we aim with the EU to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of resources that are coming into the country. So we will be supporting the government in terms of mapping stakeholder intervention. And we hope that through that, we will be able to avoid overlap and to ensure synergies. And in the longer term, hopefully, then have donor strategies being aligned to the national priorities. One other component that we will be looking at hopefully next year is to look at the mechanisms, alternative mechanisms for mobilizing additional financing, where we hope to be able to support the local authorities to prepare bankable investment projects. Next, please. The video that we saw is about the community reporters, and we wanted to put a spotlight on this initiative that has gained also a lot of popularity, I have to say, around Iraq. It is an initiative that has allowed Iraqi youth to tell their stories about the local realities. What do they see in this country? Really to deviate from the image of conflict into more of an image of medium and longer term development. So the program has established a network of 80 youth. This includes internally displaced populations, host communities, but also Syrian refugees. And now I have to say, when COVID hit and UNDP had put forward its response to COVID, UNDP used these community reporters also within their communities to look at the Let's Beat Corona, for example, campaign, but also to help us to showcase and look at issues that are related to COVID. Next, please. Through this ambitious program, we hope that we will be able to strengthen the local level interface, strengthen the social contract actually between the citizen and the state. We're also trying to empower national and local authorities through hopefully an enhanced and implementable decentralization model to move the power structures into the subnational and the local, and hopefully to be able to promote long-term strategies for sustainable development. Next. Thank you very much for the time. Again, thank you to the EU for an excellent partnership that goes even beyond LADP, the Local Area Development Program, and we look forward to our continued support. Over to you, Nada.
Thank you so much, Zeina. I'd like to open the floor now for, we have ample time for discussion, about just over 30 minutes. I'd like to first start with a question that came in from Angelica at IOM Geneva, and I'll just read out her question. She says, it would be interesting to hear how UNDP works across the HDP nexus with their sister UN agencies, and if there has been any positive examples of joint programs, and also any improved delivery as one UN. And I'd like to pose that to either Zeina or Auke to take that question, since it is posed to UNDP. Would one of you like to come forward?
Nada, if I may, let me jump in also. Please. Very briefly. Interesting that this comes from a colleague from IOM, and let me give an example of what we're doing here exactly on the nexus between the humanitarian peace and development in Iraq. We've established a durable solutions task force. Actually, it's co-chaired between IOM and UNDP, and it has other UN agencies as well as now newly donors and international NGOs. And the durable solutions comes from the idea that we've been able collectively as an international community and UN agencies to return 4.6, around a little bit more than 4.6 million IDPs back to their homes. However, 1.2 million of these remain displaced, and we do not want it to become a protracted displacement. So the durable solutions looks at pathways for us to be able collectively to return these people home. Up till now, we've done a durable solution strategy. It has an operational framework. It looks at 3 distinct groups of hardest to return populations to their areas of origin. And it also speaks and helps the government to do their own national plan on durable solutions. Let me stop here and we can provide more details as needed. Thank you, Nada.
Thank you, Zena. I'd like to take a question now from Joris at DG NEAR. The question is, I understand current thinking in, this seems to be for Libya. I'm not sure if Gerardo is still with us. Gerardo, are you still with us? Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. It's actually also for Iraq. Excuse me. I understand current thinking in Libya about LRM would be based on Iraq experience. What can we learn from Iraq? So Zena, back over to you, please.
I mean, I have to say, you're asking maybe the wrong person. I think it's a fascinating program that UNDP with 27 donors and partners have been implementing on the funding facility for stabilization. And if anything and anyone asks me, I would say actually the storyline is that this program collectively has returned more than 4.6 million people, Iraqis, back home. There are a lot of lessons learned, of course, but I have to say the structure of the program is excellent in terms of it being mandated by the Global Coalition to fight ISIL, the commitment and the resources that have been given to this program, again, by the international community, 27 donors, but also the way that we implement the program hand in hand with the local authorities, with also the overall adoption of the national authorities have proven to be excellent in terms of implementation. And the operating model in which we have different monitoring and evaluation layers, if I may say. So we do that, and then our partners and donors also do that, but we have also third-party monitoring to keep us on our toes, let me say. And finally, for UNDP internally, maybe a dedicated operational center that is quick and agile and able to implement with efficiency. I mean, we have implemented more than 3,000 projects up to now, and these range between a 5 million, 2 million, 3 million project and 35 million projects budget. So it's a great operational model. We've used that actually to put together a rapid response to COVID-19 last year. In a matter of few months, we were able to source generous contributions from the international community to set up isolation wards and to procure life-saving medical equipment using that same model. So I think it's transferable also. Thanks, Nada.
Thanks to you. And while we're waiting for the audience to get engaged on the chat, and please also do feel free to raise do the raise hand function. I'd like to put a couple of questions to Carolina and Auke. When possible, how do you connect local development initiatives with the central government? And how do you ensure the sustainability of local development initiative, of the local development initiative in Yemen? Auke, would you like to start? I'm asking the question, yes.
Yeah. Well, you're asking certainly the most difficult question there really is, because, in fact, one of the key challenges that Yemen is facing, of course, due to the impact of the conflict, is that government and governance is so fragmented, right? So basically, this is why we've been working with the EU on putting together a local governance program that really is focusing on local service delivery and economic recovery at the local level, since at the central level, things are so dysfunctional at the moment that it's really difficult to connect. So if you ask me to give you a good example of how to connect at the moment, this is very difficult, but I would underline that something that Carolina also was referring to, that this local governance program, which we're going to launch later on, is certainly one of the largest, projects of its kind at the moment. And the whole idea behind it is beyond sort of the objectives of basic service delivery and economic recovery, that it also provides a foundation for a future agreement, so that in case there will be, a central government or any other sort, that it will be resting on the pillar of local government. Because the Yemen, we knew it before the war, is certainly not going to return as a very centralized, power system in governing the state, right? It is more than likely that it will end up in a very decentralized state or federal state that will have to rely on the decentralization of power and resources to lower levels. And therefore, this local governance program is going to help us to, on the one hand, put the local governance side in place, but also spur local development at the same time, as a comprehensive package. So this is where we are more or less in Yemen, Nada.
Thank you. Okay, that's very clear. And perhaps, Carolina, maybe you'd like to complement with your thoughts on the sustainability of this initiative, the joint EU-UNDP initiative in Yemen.
Thank you very much. As Auke said, this is a really difficult question, and of course, sustainability in Yemen at the moment is it's something we hope for and aim for, but I think we also have to be very realistic that we will set in motion something that will build towards future sustainability. But we cannot expect that everything we do will be able to be sustained in the long term. I think capacity building at the right levels is always an investment in sustainability. In addition to this project with UNDP, from the EU side, we also see our support to Yemeni civil society as a critical factor for building that long-term sustainability, and also, as you mentioned, ensuring this link between local development initiatives and government actors. So we're trying to step up our engagement with Yemeni civil society actors and our support to them. At the same time, this has a lot of challenges. One is about representativeness and inclusion. There are a lot of parts of Yemeni society that are not necessarily well represented, either in local government structures or in civil society. So that's an important area to build on, both the responsiveness of local government actors towards the needs of all segments of the population, including migrants, IDPs, women, elderly people, and traditionally excluded groups. And also for civil society actors themselves to work towards ensuring that kind of inclusion. Another key critical issue is again, the differences in different parts of the country, where especially in the north of the country, we face massive challenges with the de facto authorities, and in particular, civil society partners face a lot of obstacles to implementing what they want to do. But I do still think it's worth, even if not everything we do will be sustainable, it is worth investing in that kind of capacity building, both of civil society actors and local government actors. So that's our best chance at making inroads towards sustainability, at least.
Thank you. Thank you both for your realistic but also hopeful responses. I'd like to also put the same question to Zeina, because I imagine we'll get a slightly different reflection from Iraq. But in the meantime, if I could just get the audience a little bit engaged. There's a Slido survey question that's going to be popping up on your screen. If you could kindly scan the QR code or follow the URL and put in the number to answer the Slido question. So Zeina, could you give us your reflections also on how you connect local development initiatives with the central government and how you ensure their sustainability?
Thank you, Nada. Again, I mean, let me give the example of the LADP, that is the Local Area Development Program, but that also goes to all the implementation that we do, including on stabilization programming. There is a disconnect, as in many countries, between what the local level priorities are and what the central level priorities are. And we've seen that actually in the massive demonstrations also, where even the local level is not able, the government level at the government at the local level is not able perhaps to articulate the issues that are at the center of local grievances. And I think that the structures that we are putting together, including, for example, the youth structures, the women structures, the women groups, working on the reconciliation and social cohesion through the local peace committees, the tribal leaders, all of the strengthening of the local structures at the local level, and then amplifying the messages and being sort of a catalyst to make sure that these local grievances or local issues are heard at the central level is how we're looking at it. And sustainability actually cannot happen if we do not go hand in hand with the government at all the levels again, but also with the civil society, with the private sector, with NGOs that are working. And here, whatever we are implementing, for example, in the local area development program or the social cohesion or the reconciliation agenda, we do that with local structures. And that doesn't mean that only it's the local government. It's everyone else who has a stake in this. We have end user committees. We have them with us whenever we prioritize projects that are to be implemented. So now, for example, on the funding facility for stabilization, we should be exiting, hopefully. Iraq will not need that after 2023. So we've dedicated a year and a half for a solid exit strategy to make sure that whatever has been put in place, funded generously by the international community, is actually used by the people and sustained through the local authorities.
Thank you. It sounds like both a collaborative and participatory approach. In fact, the key word that came up from the Slido survey, the question being, what is the key contributing factor for a sustainable local development initiative? The key word that came up is trust. How would you respond to that, Zeina, and then Auke and Carolina?
Absolutely. I mean, there is, again, I know that colleagues have heard me many times. I think the problem in Iraq, but also in many of the countries in this region, is a breakdown of the social contract. And at the heart of the social contract are issues of trust and confidence. And we cannot solve that only by communicating between the local subnational and the national. There has to be a commitment from all of the levels to be able to commit to what is being put to restore confidence in government legitimacy. And whatever we do as UNDP, at least in Iraq, actually aims at legitimizing the government in the sense of legitimizing the local authorities and capacitating them so that they are able to take on local development as well as national development.
Thank you, Zeina. Auke, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely.
The idea of trust.
I'll just take a different angle to it, just to provide also some perspective from Yemen. I think the issue of trust is absolutely an issue that is essential, but also of great concern, right? So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that there is an issue of mistrust between the different parties that are fighting each other in Yemen. This is really sort of, slowing down any progress towards a political settlement. But there is also a huge I would say, gap of trust between the different parties and the international community at the same time. And this leads, of course, to a very difficult operating environment, certainly in the north of Yemen, which is under the control of what we refer to as the de facto authorities, or the Houthis, if you like, right? So we have a very difficult relationship, I think, as a whole, as an international community, inside and outside Yemen, with these de facto authorities at the moment. So building trust, even how difficult it is, and even if you're dealing with in an environment where you're not dealing with internationally recognized authorities, you still have to find ways to build trust with these authorities to be able to operate and, deliver programs and assistance to Yemenis who so much deserve it, right? And that's, also a question of investment of time and energy. I'm now in Yemen for almost 5 years, and now it is kind of starting to pay off, the fact that I've been there for very long, that I know a lot of people, and that, you have these relationships being built up, be it now, on the north side of the front lines or on the south side of the front line. So it is absolutely an essential component of our daily work. It is also an absolute essential component of, our strategic thinking and planning going forward, because without that, access is a problem, monitoring is a problem, any kind of, common ground becomes a problem. So therefore, I think, it is very, pertinent to bring out the issue of trust in sort of the conflict context, I think, be it Iraq or Yemen, and there are very many different angles to this. Over.
Thank you, Auke. And Carolina, if you have any thoughts you'd like to add to the discussion, please feel free to come in.
Yes, thank you. I think it's quite striking here on this particular issue, perhaps a key difference between Iraq and Yemen. As Auke mentioned, we do have a very difficult situation with the de facto split at the central level, and a very difficult relationship with the de facto authorities who control 70 to 80% of the population of the country. I think trust in general is extremely low, but I fully agree with Zena that rebuilding the social contract between the citizens and the state is absolutely essential for development. Question is, in a context like Yemen, who do you aim to rebuild that trust with? So he said also that since the political future of the country is so uncertain, the current authorities at the central level are not, they're important, and we need to have working relationships with all of them. But it's also important to balance that with building trust in more local structures. And that's also something that allows us to operate across the country. From the EU side, it's very important to us that in spite of this fragmentation in the country and the de facto split of the central authorities, we operate with a whole of Yemen approach and try to reach populations across the whole country. And our best bet for doing that is working through local structures. I also think building another step towards building trust is something that we are very much engaged with, which is at the more political level, to try to push for an inclusive peace process where you don't just invest all the power in these two fighting parties who currently have the control over the two main parts of the country, but you try to bring in different voices from a more local level also into the peace process, so that you have a political process that doesn't just aim at stopping the fighting between the main protagonists in the conflict, but also identifying needs and setting the stage for a future peaceful society where the voices of people from the local level across all parts of the country need to feed into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. And I have a question actually that's posed to both Iraq and Yemen from the floor. This is from Henrietta. She says she's interested in hearing what are some of the lessons learned in Iraq and Yemen working on local initiatives that focus on women. So if you could provide perhaps some examples of things that did not work, why they didn't work, and how you overcame them. So I'll go back to Zena to take the first stab at responding. Thanks.
Thanks, Nada. I mean, I don't want to sound like a cliche, but we really do try to target women in all of our interventions. Some of the experiences blow us away on how positive they are, and some of them I think we're still learning by doing, and we haven't reached where we want to be. Let me start very quickly with one example that made us dance, I have to say. We do implement cash for work activities. Part of these are rubble removal, etc., things that are normally and usually done by men. We've been able to have more than 50% of these in tribal areas in Anbar. These are areas that were occupied by Daesh, participating and wanting to participate more. I mean, we were surprised, right? But we will try to build on that to move forward. On the negative side, one program that we do is the social cohesion and community reintegration of ISIL perceived affiliated families. And the first step of that is to try to mediate local peace agreements where the tribal leaders, the community leaders, the local authorities, the military, the security, all the leaders of the community, after a lot of mediation and reconciliation by UNDP and our local peace structures and our NGOs, then arrive after 6-7 months at what we call a local peace agreement that is signed by all of these community leaders. And these local peace agreements are usually the entry point for ISIL perceived families to come back to their own communities, after which we do the community reintegration. However, UNDP is not a signatory, but we are always there when a peace agreement is done to amplify it and to say that this is the way forward for reintegration. And every time we are there, I have to say I've been in 3 where we have now worked with the return of 2,700 families in a room that is full of people to witness that peace agreement from the community perspective. Most of the returnees are women and children, and I never see a woman even able to be in that room, let alone to be one of the signatories or the leaders. So that is something we haven't succeeded in. We're working towards it. It might be much more difficult because these women have been also victims of ISIL and jumped from their communities, but that is something we haven't succeeded in yet. So these are 2 examples from Iraq. Over to you, Nada.
Thank you, Zena. And I'll pass the floor to Auke to keep in line with our speaking arrangement.
Sure. And let me just say one thing about it. For us, I think one of the key lessons learned was that addressing gender issues and women empowerment directly doesn't really work in Yemen, especially I think in the north side under the de facto authorities. They consider that, culturally inappropriate and react quite harshly to, proposals in that direction. I gave the example of Iman, right, whereby she was able, from a beneficiary, to become like a business owner and, getting a lot more women involved in the solar energy project. And I think we found that the key lessons learned is we work through, economic empowerment and really include women in these kind of projects. They are empowered by itself through the workings of the project, and they become stronger, earning income and so on. And that is allowable currently in Yemen. This is something that we found is actually working in our projects. And if there's one key lesson learned is that, don't give up, but just find other ways of dealing with the gender issues that are very prominent in the country.
Yeah, thank you, Auke. And Catalina, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just I like that Auke's comments. Don't give up. We cannot possibly give up on this issue in Yemen because according to the Gender Inequality Index, Yemen ranks the lowest in the world on gender equality. Women's participation in the labor force is at about 6%. This is a massive obstacle to development and a huge underused resource. So it would be, of course, to the benefit of the entire population of Yemen if women could play a stronger role in the economy, in politics, in society as a whole, and that women's rights were respected. I think our lessons learned are very similar to those of UNDP, that especially in the north of the country, it's very difficult to explicitly work on or even talk about gender equality and women's empowerment, but there are possibilities, especially at the local level, to strengthen women's involvement in the economy, entrepreneurship, women-run businesses, cash for work, etc. And also, I think that there are greater opportunities for women to take leadership positions in local government structures, local civil society actors, and so on. We recently saw in December the formation of a new cabinet under the internationally recognized government of Yemen, which for the first time in 20 years did not have a single female minister. So that's at the central level. At the internationally recognized government, let alone the Ansar Allah authorities in the north. So at the central level, it's hugely difficult, but at the local level, we are seeing quite a lot of progress on this, and it's definitely an area where we from the EU side will focus much more of our attention in the coming year, and we believe there's a huge potential there.
Thank you. And Henrietta thanks you as well for your responses. And Sabra, who spoke earlier in the Libya session, says that this is why we need women organizations as expert groups, inclusion, and especially in Yemen. So just a comment from the floor. We have one more Slido question to ask as we wrap up the session here. So if those in the audience could kindly scan the QR code or follow the URL and enter the number to answer this last Slido question, it will feed into our next panel discussion. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank you once again, Catalina, Auke, Zena, for your thoughtful responses and for your interesting presentations. And thank you to those participants who actively engaged. This concludes our second exchange. We'll be moving immediately to our next panel discussion on how the EU and UNDP can join forces to work locally in the future. And your Slido response answers will help us in bringing that discussion together in our next session. Thanks so much again, and be well. Have a good day. So we'll just give 2 minutes or so for our panelists in the next session to prepare themselves and for participants to respond to the Slido question. What did you find most insightful in this event so far? So I'll start reading some of these out for our panelists to keep in mind. The insights from the field have been very insightful. If you could keep the Slido presentation up, thanks. Having both the EU, the political actor and donor, as well as UNDP views, has also been, has provided insight for the audience, the exchange by the practitioners. And we'd love to hear more of your responses, colleagues. The reflections on measuring impact offered by the EU and the resident representative of Libya. Unity between the EU and UNDP on needs and priorities. Okay. So we will move ahead into our session on joining forces. Thanks for taking part in this survey. I hope your questions will or your answers will continue to come in. I want to begin by introducing our panelists who have been listening with interest and in an effort to capture all that's been shared from the speakers, from the audience, from the Slido questions that have been shared, as they prepare to offer their final reflections on the day, which has been no easy task. And without further ado, allow me to introduce them both. I'd like to reintroduce Carolina Hedstrom, who you've already met, Head of Cooperation at the EU Delegation to Yemen, and from UN. Carolina, Giordano, we have 30 minutes for that. I'm going to ask you 3 questions in total, which I will pose one at a time, giving you both the opportunity to respond in turn. You'll each have approximately 5 minutes per response. And if you agree, perhaps we can start with Carolina and then move to Giordano. Does that work? Okay. So what are the best practices? This is question number 1. What are the best practices and approaches that we can learn from and replicate? So whenever you're ready, Carolina, over to you.
Thank you very much. What are the best practices and approaches we can learn from and replicate? I think, first of all, speaking from our experience from Yemen, we've found that this integrated way of working, looking at human and social development and economic opportunities in a connected way with a local focus, involving civil society actors, trying to strengthen the link between civil society, government actors, and private sector is a good way of working. The implementation environment in Yemen is so complex that you cannot address any one issue in isolation. So this sort of integrated, holistic approach is very important. You will also hear more in terms of lessons learned and what we can replicate in the next session, where we will talk about the new EU UNDP project in Yemen, Sierra, which is very much building on the lessons learned that we've learned from our previous cooperation in Yemen. So that's the key best practice, I think, this integrated, comprehensive approach and local level. I also think having a conflict-sensitive approach where we understand and are sensitive to the different context in different parts of the country and how we need to adapt what we do in different environments and at different times is a key lesson learned. And then just to mention again, I think gender, including women in everything, is sometimes overlooked because the needs are so enormous, but it's a huge underused resource. And when we don't give up but keep trying, like Auke said, we have learned the lesson that it definitely is possible to involve women in pretty much all our activities. So those are some of the key lessons learned. Thank you.
Thank you. And I understood from the organizers that my sound broke while I was introducing Giordano. So if I could just reintroduce Giordano Senieri, team leader for governance and peace building at the Regional Hub for Arab States in Amman, Jordan, from UNDP. And Giordano, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Thank you, Nada.
Okay.
So thank you so much, colleagues. First of all, let me say that it's been a pleasure to hear all the rich views and insightful perspectives from the field. I think the programming approach we have heard from Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen can be summarized as trying to achieve two objectives: a short-term service delivery and resilience work on alleviating people's suffering and support recovery, and build the basis for a longer-term institutional change and sustaining peace. Working across the HDP nexus and durable solutions, I think, are essential to bridge coherently the short-term and long-term objectives. But we know the timelines of these transformations vary according to the context. Even if some rapid improvement can be achieved in service delivery and community security, effective local governance systems flourish when core values and principles, including rule of law, have penetrated all parts of society. So this can be generational changes. But across the presentation, at least 4 approaches or best practices have seemed to emerge, in my view, on how to more effectively accompany crisis and fragile countries in this process. The first is broadening participation. This has been said by everyone. It's crucial to stability and for sustainable recovery, but it implies 2 assumptions. First, that our local governance does not equate to working with the government only, but with the wider local socio-political and economic ecosystem, but also that the governance is a cross-cutting and has an impact on all actors and on all sectors. So broadening participation means empowering community, mobilizing network, also informal, of women and youth, facilitating connection with the authority to create trust, a culture of dialogue, and a sense of reciprocal accountability. Innovative leadership at the local level, as defined by Gerardo Not of UNDP Libya, shall be leveraged to rebuild that social fabric. Because under the microscope, the social fabric is a mosaic of individual and community level linkages, and they have an influence on the local structure. So it's important to support that process and those linkages. We have seen how, in some examples that were presented, political system can be reinvigorated through local level multi-stakeholder mechanism, people involvement in planning and resilience. We have seen in UNDP Lebanon with their participatory processes of communities, including refugees, in planning and programming, UNDP Libya, Iraq in the efforts of supporting local structure to address local issues, and in Yemen around community resilience plan and cooperative councils. So UNDP's approach to localizing governance can help those bottom-up processes, which set the pace for ownership and accountability, and is crucial for recovery and for the political buy-in for a future reconciliation agenda. The second element is the system thinking, area-based approach, portfolio programming, adaptive mechanisms. We have seen in Lebanon, in Iraq, how these words came out. The systemic approach, we see that is helping programs to be constantly aligned to a changing context and to be more demand-driven. This is crucial. However, we know this is challenged often by short-term funding cycles or project-focused mindset, but this is really something that needs to be pursued. The third is multi-level governance and the linkage between local planning and national planning. Globally, local government budgets are decreasing around 20% in 2021, but yet local demands have increased, which risk undermining public service delivery, sustainable development, and even human development. Therefore, for what I heard, first and foremost, we need to strengthen support to municipal capacity and decentralization. The EU representative from Beirut, José Vinuesa, referred to the burden on municipalities for solid waste management and service delivery and the lack of funding at the local level. Zena, Iraq representative of UNDP, talked about how critical decentralization is a pillar for rebuilding trust between cities and the state. The second is because local participation should be taken into account to avoid that local planning and national planning operate in silo. We want to avoid that a sectoral plan is in conflict with the local level. And multi-level governance has been mentioned by everyone. UNDP Lebanon talked about horizontal and vertical linkages to programming. UNDP Libya about the importance of working across level for service provision. Also, in the future reunification of institutions in the territory. So these are key elements. The fourth and last, I believe, is that has been mentioned by Carolina just now, is that first of all, we shouldn't go under minimum standard in terms of conflict sensitivity, but social cohesion should also be the programming lens. In other words, livelihood, resilience, and the broader environment for recovery should be social cohesion sensitive. We should bring communities such as in Lebanon between host community and Syrian refugees and work in Iraq. Every activity should have that lens, facilitating contacts, facilitating bridges. This is what makes solutions provided sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm going to switch the order for the next question to give Carolina the chance also to react to Giordano. What is needed to strengthen our future action is question number 2. So Giordano, just under 5 minutes if possible, and I will hand over to Carolina from there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was just looking at statistics, and in 2018, UNDP spent $1.6 billion, or the 40% of its budget, in strengthening effective, inclusive, and accountable governance at all levels. This has increased over 45% of the budget in 2020. So we provide technical support and expertise globally, thanks to our partners and donors. But the examples I've heard this morning reveal that a simple but key question: how can we better navigate some key political challenges in delivering our work? And 3 considerations came to my mind for future action. The first is how to operate on areas in limited statehood. I mean, boosting risk awareness and capacity for operating where settings are fluid. It means adapting to our assumption, strategy, and partnership as we go along. Carolina mentioned the issues of institutional fragmentation that might inevitably characterize the post-conflict landscape in Yemen. This means critically looking at capacities to operate in hybrid governance arrangements, where we have no state actors, where we have limited legitimacy of governments, or limited central management of some sectors, etc. So this is important. This is an important question we have to ask ourselves, and we are carrying out now a regional study to investigate those elements and be more prepared in operating in these fields. The second is, I think, the second element is how resilient service delivery and local governance engagement should lead to broader transformations nationally, normative transformation, rule of law, security, human rights. We have heard, as UNDP Lebanon, the access to justice and community security projects at the local level are articulated in a way that can have an impact, have an aspirational impact to change systemic transformation. And I think what is key is to make that happen, the transformation and that impact happen, is working about the removal of barriers that slow down or hamper resilience and inclusive recovery. I mean, women have been mentioned many times. The fact that they suffer a compounded effect of crisis at low level, they are underrepresented, and it's important to make sure that barrier to access to financing, entrepreneurship capacities, access to banking sector. So this means revising laws that disproportionately impact women. This means also looking at the question of access to property laws. So these are very key issues that can, that if addressed programmatically, can have a strong impact. And I'm happy to hear that the EU will focus on those areas in the years to come.
Thank you, Giordano, and over to you, Carolina, for your reflections.
Thank you very much. I think what is needed is quite a lot of more of what we have already started, but we need to be sometimes more deliberate and honest in what we do. A key issue that's needed is I think in all the country contexts that have been discussed today is of course conflict sensitivity. And there we need more research, more information, more local knowledge. And we also need to be more sensitive to and frank about what are the political conditions that we are operating under so that we understand our impact in those areas. Another key issue, I think, that as you mentioned also, Giordano, and we've mentioned a lot today, is I think we need to be more deliberate when it comes to inclusion in all aspects of what we do. It's not sufficient to say that 30% of beneficiaries will be women or so and so many will be youth. We need to ensure that we have a checklist, some way of ensuring that we include different members of the population in all aspects of project planning, implementation, monitoring, focus groups, as somebody mentioned, and so on. When it comes to working at the local level and building these links between civil society, community groups and local government, we often rely on community groups. And it's definitely in Yemen, but I'm sure in many of the other countries we've talked about, those community groups are often not very representative of the actual community. So we cannot just take things at face value. We have to ask, where are the women? Where are the IDPs? Are we really seeing, hearing the views of a cross-section of society? And if not, what can we do to hear those views in some other way? Another key issue, I think, that has it's clear for almost all the countries we're talking about. It came up in a relation to Iraq and very much so on Yemen, that we need to continue moving towards longer-term development solutions rather than focusing on humanitarian aid only and stabilization in fragile conflict contexts. And in order to do that, we need to build systems of interoperability with the humanitarian actors that will allow us to move from simply meeting life-saving urgent needs today to setting in place systems and structures that will eventually become more sustainable. And in order to do that, I think we need to invest a lot more in monitoring to be able to really see what works, what doesn't work, what should we do more or less of in the future. And at least in Yemen, a critical missing factor there is statistics. We just don't have the data from the ground about human and social development indicators, for example. So that means that we don't really know exactly the impact of our projects, and we need to find ways of both supporting national capacities to strengthen statistics collection, research, and so on, but also find more innovative ways of doing that kind of impact monitoring. And all this, to go back to what I mentioned in the beginning, I think we need a more honest and a self-critical, reflective approach. We don't honestly really know exactly the impact of our activities, what works well or not. And we are operating in extremely challenging environments, so we need to be able to be frank when something is not working or when we simply don't know. But still, as Auke said, we mustn't give up. We have to keep trying and hope that we will be able to see and prove impact of these activities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also for your honesty with that. It is indeed something that we don't normally say. So much appreciated. As a last question, I'll flip the order again, if that's okay. So going to Carolina first. Are there additional opportunities for collaboration, any next steps to consider, or any other reflections that you'd like to share in closing?
In terms of other opportunities or additional opportunities for collaboration, I think, just as I mentioned, there is a huge untapped potential when it comes to women's employment and involvement in public life. I also think that there is huge potential to focus more on environment issues. From the EU side, you've already heard a bit about the Green Deal, which is a key priority for us. And I think there is definitely potential in conflict-infected and fragile countries to focus more on environmental issues, both as from a conflict sensitivity point of view, as a potential driver of conflict, as we've seen in some of these countries, but also just if we do believe in the future of these countries and in laying the foundation for future sustainable development, we cannot afford not to think about how we ensure that such development is green and sustainable. So that's definitely an area where I think we have a lot of common interest and a lot of potential. And then I think in general, just as an opportunity, I think we can all afford to be a lot more ambitious when it comes to our engagement in conflict-affected and fragile countries, and really make an effort to change the narrative from simply talking about the conflict, the humanitarian crisis, or whatever it may be in each country. But be bold and look towards the future and talk more about the kind of country we are working towards and also what works well. And I think there we also have a joint responsibility to try to change the public perception and media narrative when it comes to these countries, to really showcase a lot of these activities that we are doing together, which are yielding results and having a significant impact on people's lives. This should be better known, and we need to publicize it much more. Thank you.
There you go. Since there are a few more minutes remaining in your segment of the response, I just want to take a comment from the floor to see if you'd like to elaborate or comment on it. That labor migration is also an opportunity when it comes to Libya. I don't know. Understanding that you are coming from the Yemen point of view, I wonder if you have any thoughts on labor migration before we move over to Giordano.
No, I think on that one, I'll hand over to Giordano. Thank you.
Fair enough. Perfect. Giordano, over to you.
Thank you very much. I will not repeat the aspects mentioned by Carolina, which I believe are all crucial and central to a possible strengthening of the partnership between the UNDP and the EU. I will mention probably three other points that have been also referred to in the conversation this morning. The first one is one of conflict sensitivity. I think it's important that there is a systematic coordination and alignment on conflict sensitivity at strategic level between UNDP and the EU, but also other donors and partners, as well as all UN organizations. And within our own institutions, because sometimes we don't share the same analysis internally and at a different level, from field, regional, and headquarters. So this some deep dives on context issues, on conflict dynamics, and having a regular understanding of what is happening at the local and national level is very important. There are some good examples, such as in Libya, but also in Lebanon, and I think this is something that we have to leverage on. The second is, I think, something that remains on top of the agenda of development actors, which is achieving the sustainable development goals and leaving no one behind. These remain a key issues in all contexts and in all settings. And as part of this, I think additional efforts has to be done by our institution, and I'm talking about UNDP, also in the capacity to reach those who are hard to reach. And this would require some more integration between even our area of work. For example, livelihoods is very able in terms of discipline, in terms of practice, to reach out to people who are marginalized. But other parts of the system should learn from and should build on livelihood work to reach out to those categories. There is a survey that was carried out by the UNDP 2 years ago around 12 Arab countries, where it was asked about concern of people around discrimination, socioeconomic circumstances and governance, shocks and fragility. And 40% of respondents believe the governance responsiveness in this area has stayed the same. 30% it has worsened in the last decade, and 22% it has improved. But what is important to highlight is that the richer segment of the sample were more likely to assign improvement, while the lower income responded were more likely to feel the responsiveness has worsened. I mean, this underscored the need to examine our development and resilience actions, also using this inequality lens. And I agree with Carolina on the importance of how we measure impact. There are some experience and some practices. There are in some country offices, also through the support of the Accelerators Lab, there are first attempts to harness digital technology for measuring impact. And I think it's the Lebanon country offices that carries out continuous sense making to get the feedback from beneficiary on service on the service delivery, even on issues of access to justice. And this can help to keep the pulse and of the reality and see how programming can be reoriented. But definitely is an area where sharing lessons learned, good practices, and boosting our capacities of cooperation is important. Thanks.
Thanks to you. Thanks very much to both of you, Carolina and Giordano, for those thoughtful reflections, really bringing together the discussions and the presentations of the day and summarizing them nicely. We have a few minutes, 3 in fact, before we go to the launch of the CIERI project in Yemen, and I thought it would be a good opportunity for us all to take a brief stretch break. So let's pause here for 2 minutes, and we'll see you back at 1 p.m. Brussels time for the launch of CIERI. Thank you again. Welcome back. I'm very pleased to introduce His Excellency Mr. Hans Gunberg, EU Ambassador to Yemen, who is here with us live, as well as to reintroduce UNDP Resident Representative Mr. Al-Kalutzma to the conclusion of this excellent workshop, which is also the launch of the largest ever EU UNDP project, strengthening institutional and economic resilience in Yemen. To kick us off, UNDP Assistant Administrator and Director of the Regional Bureau for Arab States, Dr. Khalida Bouzar, has prepared her opening remarks in this pre-recorded video.
I'm pleased to express my gratitude on behalf of UNDP for the increasingly strong partnership with the EU to jointly respond to Yemen's deep development challenges. As we know, these challenges are as vast as they are deep and are only worsening in the context of the current COVID-19 crisis. War has already pushed development back in Yemen by 2 decades, and at current rates, the country is projected to only be able to reach the SDGs 3 decades after the 2030 cutoff date. It is a humanitarian and development crisis without comparison. As we work diligently to address pressing immediate needs, including the possibility of wide-scale famine, we must work with equal determination to stave off a future dependent on humanitarian aid, a future where once peace is secured, it can be sustained. Development challenges everywhere cannot be dealt with in isolation, but rather must be tackled holistically. The way we work and the solution we develop must be well integrated across areas and among different actors, strengthening the humanitarian development peace nexus and delivering sustainable and inclusive gains. This is always the case, but even more so in the context of challenges like those facing Yemen, among the most pressing in the world. The importance of partnerships cannot be underestimated in this context, and our EU-UNDP partnership in Yemen is an important and excellent example. Together, we have touched the lives of hundreds of thousands of people across the country. For example, our joint initiatives helped nearly 150,000 farmers in 230 communities to strengthen food security and livelihood, and we have helped establish over 4,000 micro businesses between 2018 and 2020. As development practitioner providing support in crisis, our message is clear. Supporting resilience and strengthening the nexus yields dividends for people now, including the most vulnerable. And it also helps pave a path out of crisis and humanitarian needs in the medium and longer terms. The project on strengthening institutional and economic resilience in Yemen, SIERI, will contribute to these objectives by positively impacting the lives of local communities and reinforcing capacities which are pivotal for the road ahead. In particular, the project will scale up support to local governance systems to ensure the functioning of basic services. At the same time, supporting sustainable economic recovery processes at the community level and boosting social cohesion at the community level, all in support of highly vulnerable communities. What is needed most in Yemen is renewed prospects for bringing peace to the country, but also investing in hope cannot wait. Reaching the vulnerable cannot wait, and supporting a future where once peace is achieved, it can be sustained, also cannot wait. This is the essence of support for resilience, and I'm grateful to the EU for the commitment to our partnership, which is strategic, and for the close collaboration addressing the critical challenges facing Yemenis today and unfortunately for the future. Thank you.
Welcome back. To complement Khalida's words, I'd like to invite His Excellency, the EU Ambassador to Yemen, to share his remarks. Over to you, Mr. Grunberg.
Thank you very much, and thanks for a very interesting workshop and extremely valuable discussion. I have to say, I have been listening in with a great level of interest. As the speakers before me, I will also want to thank our UNDP friends for having organized this important initiative. And as has been stated numerous times, but also has been made clear during the discussions here, over the past years, the European Union and the UNDP have fruitfully collaborated on a number of initiatives in Yemen. And the EU is definitely determined to continue this partnership. And I am personally also very grateful for this deep collaboration that we have jointly. Regarding Yemen, I think we are all aware of the catastrophic situation in the country, and that the central institutions struggle to exercise their authority and to deliver services on their territory. The risk of this situation is, of course, that a void is created, a vacuum appears, and that different actors with diverging interests will try to fill that void and take advantage of the situation and further complicating it to a level that then can almost not be salvaged. And so as the discussion has focused on, an appropriate and relevant entry point for the development cooperation work in Yemen is therefore on the local level. And the local level has demonstrated a particular level of resilience in that regard. And the most urgent needs that has been identified on this local level is the delivery of basic services, support of the economy, and creation of jobs, in particular for women and young women and men as well. And this is really, and you will have to apologize me for repeating myself, but this is, and also for repeating what others have said before, but this is really the reason why we designed, together with the UNDP, this pioneering program that has been mentioned all over again. And we call it SERI, which stands for Supporting the Institutional and Economic Resilience of Yemen. And this represents the most sizable cooperation between the EU and the UNDP in the country, and it is the largest single contract that the European Union has signed so far, with a total of about 70 million euros. So for us, for the European Union, which is already a fairly large contributor, this is an important program. This is a large contribution. The European Union, together with its member states, we are the first donor, and that it has heavily invested in the support to local authorities. EU member states have also financed complementary interventions to this in a very true Team Europe approach, which I'm pleased to see. And the initiative will, on one side, support local authorities to deliver basic services with a special focus on WASH and education, but also support the private sector, and especially small and medium-sized enterprises in agriculture, value chain, and fisheries. SERI represents the long-awaited shift in the approach of aid operators, where the indispensable humanitarian aid, the emergency-based and short-term bound by definition, is finally complemented by medium to long-term development assistance. So this is, in a true essence of the terminology, the nexus in action. So in fact, while humanitarian assistance is absolutely essential to meet the needs of millions of Yemenis today, it is crucial that we also focus on laying the foundations for a sustainable development in Yemen tomorrow. And this goes very well in line with what the head of cooperation at the delegation, Carolina Hedström's very important comments earlier, where she said that we need jointly to believe in the future of Yemen. And for that to happen, we need to step beyond the emergency support and start planning for the future. So this program will also represent another new development for the European Union in the country. So while supporting communities in their daily struggles, we will also expand our action to institutions and reinforce their capacity to deliver the much needed basic services. And for this reason, all these reasons that I have listed, I am on a personal level, but also in my formal capacity, really proud of this initiative. And I am confident that our collaboration with the UNDP will have a great impact on Yemen, in addition to all the other activities that we do. So our relentless work and our relentless engagement with the people of Yemen will continue, and we're happy to do that together with UNDP. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those inspiring last remarks. And last but not least, I'd like to invite Auke Lutzma to share his statement. Over to you, Auke.
Yeah, thank you, Nada, and good afternoon to everyone, especially Ambassador Grunberg. We're working very well together, so it's really a pleasure to see you on the screen as well. So together with the Ambassador and all of you, I'm really delighted to launch the Strengthening Institutional Economic Resilience Project in Yemen. As we said, it is abbreviated as SHERI. And indeed, it is the largest EU-funded UNDP program in the Arab States region at the moment. And SHERI really responds to crucial development challenges across Yemen. Fully aligned with the European Union's global strategy, it has really been designed to support greater capacity to build resilience in the local governance systems. And I think Hans already elaborated on that quite a bit. It is actually a 3-year initiative. It aims to ensure economic and social well-being for Yemenis, and it is aimed at particularly the poorest and the most vulnerable, including women and children. SHERI operates on the understanding that local communities cannot depend solely on self-help or foreign aid. The project recognizes that what is truly needed for success are local authorities in their communities to fulfill their role as service providers. And this includes providing access to water, sanitation, electricity, and transport. But it also tries to address conflict resolution, humanitarian aid, disaster management, and economic recovery at the same time. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, for a country that has been now in conflict for over 6 years, Yemen's government institutions have severely weakened. On the ground, we are witnessing that every day. We are witnessing that the relatively young local systems have poorly handled basic service delivery. They really struggle, to tailor operations to the unique social and political realities of modern Yemen. But working while experiencing crisis on top of crises, even the most resilient local authorities risk further deterioration and widening gaps in service delivery and sustainability of aid. And certainly also the viability of any future political settlement and a transition to peace. Without this intervention, local instability threatens to further perpetuate conflict. So on the contrary, our view is, with SHERI, it really provides a platform, a foundation for a future peace settlement. Now, the project operates through 2 main pillars of resilience. One is the institutional, and the other is economic. And we have designed a structured and systematic project for subnational authorities at the government and the district level to help maintain, enhance, and expand performance. But SHERI's, I think, a unique approach endeavors to go beyond the traditional scope of support. We are focusing on trust building, climate resilience, and addressing population displacement, and also supporting local economic development. By providing technical support and discretionary funding to devise and implement local recovery plans, SHERI will work to build participatory, inclusive, and accountable governance systems. And, in line with Agenda 2030, it will also foster an emerging nationwide compact to restore Yemen's local governance system to support peace and state building. As mentioned, at the same time, the project will also empower the private sector to aid economic recovery and boost Yemen's employment. And this will help us to enable the reconstruction of community prioritized infrastructure and support small and medium enterprises to expand and scale up operations. So by creating an enabling environment for business in Yemen, we stand to stabilize the market economy and strengthen financial capacity for national recovery. Less risky financial systems has also eased the pressure on average Yemenis to enable them to invest for the future. So recently, and I witnessed that, we have selected 45 target districts in 9 governorates to receive institutional support through SHERI, and an additional 16 districts in 4 governorates to receive economic resilience building support. And as such, that shows you that the project truly will have widespread and national impact. So in summary, in Yemen, SHERI is going to be a crucial stepping stone towards stabilization, recovery, and ultimately peaceful state building. And we're very much looking forward to embarking on this journey with the commitment and the support of the European Union. We're very thankful, and thank you all. Over.
Thank you, Auke, and thank you once again, Ambassador. On this high note, we have come to the end of our workshop. Thank you again to all of the UNDP and EU colleagues who presented today. And a special word of thanks to my colleagues at UNDP, Dunya, Sophia, Jonathan, organizing this workshop, and to our friends at Learnance for supporting us seamlessly on the tech side throughout the event. And thank you again to all of you participants for your attention, your engagement, your reflections, and your presence with us today. This concludes our workshop. Be well, take good care, and best wishes to you all.